will fully admit, and I admitted this to Zach on Monday, that I was wrong about Texas. I did not give the Longhorns much of a chance to go into Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama on Alabama's home turf. But Steve Sarkisian's team really controlled that game. They won 34-24, and this team looks pretty good. Zach was telling me they were good, and I'm starting to believe. But we've also seen this movie before where Texas loses some games that it probably shouldn't lose. So what is the biggest hurdle for you guys that's standing in the way of Texas maybe getting that Big 12 title for the first time since 2009?
You want to start with that one, Zach?
Yeah. I'll kind of take some credit for picking Texas in that game. Not that it's
well played.
Yeah. I will never forget. I think it was after they lost to Kansas a couple of years ago, going to Sarkisian's Monday availability, and everybody in the room was just downtrodden and just like everybody was like, the sky is falling and fire Sarkisian and all that stuff. But he got up there and said, listen, we've got like this really, really good recruiting class that was filled with like 3, 4-star and 5-star offensive linemen and all this. And you could really tell that he had a plan, right? And that was a couple of years ago, and now that plan is coming to a head. And to me, there's not much that can get in their way in the Big 12. Maybe Oklahoma. Traditionally Texas is going to lose one of those games they shouldn't lose, like to Baylor, right? So like I think you
said it would be the most Texas thing ever for them to come here in 2 weeks and lose to Baylor.
Yeah, I'm not at the point where I think I'm picking Baylor, but I'm not too far away. Like if it comes to 2 weeks from now, if Baylor beats Long Island like 50-0, if they drop a 50 burger on them, I might pick Baylor over Texas. But let's see how Texas looks against Wyoming first, and yeah. So I think the answer to your question is not much, honestly. I think that this is a different Texas team. I think this is a more an Alabama-fied Texas team where they think they go into a room knowing that they're the best. Whereas I think there was always a sense of like, are we going to Texas this? So like, I just think they can't trip over over themselves, right? Which would be a game like Baylor. So yeah.
Jerry?
Yeah, I think again, their biggest hurdle is probably Texas. That's that they've got to be able to get out of or stay out of their own way. I think the biggest Texas being Texas would be losing this week. Wyoming at home. Wyoming just beat Texas Tech, so they're not a complete pushover. I was looking at their schedule though, guys, and most of their toughest games are right there at DKR. So I do think the road is paved that way for them, at least to get to the Big 12 championship game. They obviously have some tough tests. They're going to play Oklahoma in the shootout, and they've got Kansas State coming to Austin. They've got most of their toughest games they're going to be in Austin. So I look for them to at least be in the Big 12 championship game, but again, they could just as easily, slip up and lose a couple of games like we've seen them do pretty much every year.
College football is weird, and you can't. There's always some games where you're just like, where did that come from? And I will say, I think that Brett Yormark has to be sitting there thinking, no, not the Longhorns, not the Sooners. We don't want them winning the Big 12 on their way out. Let's keep one of these other schools, as the champion. But yeah, they certainly have the talent, which they have often had, but they do look a little more. The Alabama win was an eye opener for me. So Longhorns look tough, but there's a lot of football left to be played. That's a cliche, but nevertheless.
Could we say that maybe Alabama's not as good as we thought either?
I
think
agree.
that's a team that could go like 7-5, 8-4 or something and be a disaster in Alabama. But I don't, and particularly at quarterback, I don't know that that's, they're not as good as they've been. It's still a great win, particularly on the road, but this is not the Alabama of, that won how many ever national championships with Nick Saban.
I think that's a fair point. And yet I saw some tweet, I think it was from Fox College Football, that predicted the New Year's 6 games, and they still had Alabama in a game. And I thought Alabama could probably lose 2 games at least and still get in just because they're Alabama. But that's a whole nother argument.